History changed forever because of something almost invisible, not tons of explosives, not massive firepower, just a tiny amount of missing matter, less than a gram. Around 0.7 grams of matter disappeared, and in that moment, an entire city felt the force of it. This is not just a story about a bomb. This is a story about the hidden power inside reality itself. Because what destroyed Hiroshima was not just a weapon, it was a discovery that revealed a truth so powerful that it reshaped science, war, and the future of humanity in a single flash. The numbers sound unreal at first. 0.7 grams is lighter than a small coin. It is smaller than a pinch of dust. Yet that tiny loss of mass released energy equal to thousands of tons of TNT. Not because the bomb was filled with chemicals, but because matter itself was converted into pure energy. This is where the story becomes deeper, because the real question is not what exploded, but what vanished. What disappeared in that moment carried more energy than anything humans had ever unleashed before. And the most unsettling part is this: the rest of the material did not even react. Only a tiny fraction was enough. At the center of this story lies one simple idea that changed everything, the idea described by mass energy equivalence. This equation shows that mass is not just physical substance. It is stored energy, locked energy, silent and invisible, waiting inside every object around us. The speed of light, a number so large it is almost impossible to grasp, turns even the smallest mass into an enormous amount of energy when squared. This is why 0.7 grams was not small at all. It was massive, just hidden in a form people could not see. On August 6, 1945, in the city of Hiroshima, this hidden power was released in a way the world had never witnessed. In a fraction of a second, the energy burst out as blinding light, extreme heat, and a shock wave that moved faster than sound. Buildings vanished, shadows burned into walls. Temperatures rose higher than the surface of the sun for an instant. But behind all of this destruction, behind the fire and force, there was something even more important to understand. The event was not just about war, it was about what humans had learned. It was proof that the structure of matter itself could be broken, and when it breaks, it releases energy beyond imagination. There is another detail that is often missed. The bomb itself contained much more material, yet only a small portion actually turned into energy. The reaction was far from perfect. In fact, most of the mass remained unused. This means the destruction seen that day came from only a fraction of what was possible. This single fact changes how the event is understood. It shows that the true potential of this process is far greater than what was witnessed. It reveals a level of power that science had uncovered but not fully controlled. And that is what makes this story both fascinating and unsettling at the same time. The chain reaction inside the bomb followed the rules of nuclear fission, where atoms split and release energy along with more particles that continue the process. Each split triggered another, creating a rapid cascade that multiplied within microseconds. It was not a slow burn. It was an instant release, a sudden conversion of mass into energy that expanded outward in every direction. This is why the explosion felt different from anything before it. It was not just force, it was transformation. Matter itself was being turned into pure energy right in front of human eyes. What makes this story even more powerful is that the same principle is not limited to weapons. It is the same process that powers stars. The light from the sun, the energy that supports life on Earth, comes from similar transformations happening continuously in its core. This means the force that destroyed Hiroshima is the same force that lights up the universe. It is both creative and destructive. It builds worlds and can also erase them. This dual nature of science is what makes it so important to understand, because knowledge itself is neither good nor bad. It depends on how it is used. In this video, everything will be broken down in a simple way. The truth behind the number 0.7 grams will be explained clearly. The real reason why such a small amount of mass created such a massive explosion will be uncovered step by step. The science behind mass turning into energy will be made easy to understand without complicated language. The details that are often ignored will be brought forward, including how inefficient the bomb actually was and what that reveals about the true scale of energy hidden inside matter. By the end, the connection between physics, history, and human choices will become clear. There is also a deeper reason to stay until the end. This is not only about understanding the past. It is about understanding the limits of power and the responsibility that comes with knowledge. The story leads to a bigger question about what humans are capable of now that this principle is known. Because once something is discovered, it cannot be undiscovered. The knowledge remains, and that changes everything. What began as a scientific idea turned into one of the most important and serious moments in human history. Less than a gram of matter was enough to prove that the world is not as solid as it seems, that inside every object there is hidden energy waiting under the surface, and that the line between creation and destruction can be thinner than expected. Welcome to the channel, where complex ideas are made simple and powerful truths are explored in depth. If this kind of content interests you, make sure to subscribe and stay connected, because the journey into science, history, and the hidden nature of reality is only just beginning. The number sounds almost too small to take seriously, yet it carries a weight that history can never forget. Around 0.7 grams of mass was converted into energy. That is less than the weight of a simple paperclip, something so light it can rest on your fingertip without effort. It is the kind of amount people would normally ignore, something that would never be considered powerful or dangerous. But in this case, that tiny fraction became one of the most destructive forces ever released by humans. In the city of Hiroshima, this almost invisible loss of matter turned into an explosion that reshaped lives, buildings, and the course of history itself. The contrast is difficult to accept at first. A massive city, full of people and structures, brought down not by tons of material, but by less than a gram disappearing. This is where the tension rises, because it shows that the real danger was never in size or weight. It was hidden deep inside the nature of matter. This is not just a historical event frozen in time. It is a clear example of physics at its most dangerous, where the smallest change can lead to the largest consequences. To understand this, the idea must be broken down in the simplest possible way. Matter, the solid substance that makes up everything around us, is not just passive or stable. It holds energy inside it, locked tightly in a form that usually stays hidden. This means that every object, no matter how small, contains a kind of stored power. This idea is described by mass energy equivalence, a principle that connects mass and energy as two forms of the same thing. In simple terms, mass can turn into energy, and energy can turn into mass. The reason this becomes so powerful is because of one part of the equation, the speed of light. This number is extremely large, and when it is squared, it becomes even larger beyond easy understanding. That massive number acts like a multiplier, turning even a tiny bit of mass into an enormous amount of energy. This is why 0.7 grams was not small in terms of what it could do. It only looked small because it was still in the form of matter. Once converted, it revealed its true scale. Even a tiny amount of mass holds energy that can go far beyond human expectations, and that is what makes this idea both fascinating and deeply unsettling. Inside the bomb, this principle was not just theory. It was put into action through a process called nuclear fission. Atoms, which are usually stable, were forced to split apart into smaller pieces. When one atom splits, it releases energy along with particles that hit other atoms and cause them to split as well. This creates a chain reaction where one event leads to many more in a rapid sequence. It is not slow or controlled. It builds up extremely fast, multiplying again and again in a very short time. Each split releases more energy, more particles, and more movement, until everything happens almost at once. The result is a sudden burst of heat, light, radiation, and force. This is why the explosion was so intense. It was not just a chemical reaction like ordinary explosives. It was a fundamental change happening at the level of matter itself. Atoms were being broken apart, and in that process, some of their mass was turning directly into energy. This is what made the explosion different from anything that came before it. It was not simply an explosion, it was matter itself breaking apart and releasing the energy it had been holding all along. There is an important detail that often gets misunderstood. The bomb did not contain only 0.7 grams of material. In reality, it had much more. But only a very small portion of that material actually took part in the reaction that converted mass into energy. The process was not fully efficient. Early nuclear weapons were limited in how much of their material could undergo fission before the reaction stopped. This means most of the mass remained unused, never releasing its energy. Only a tiny fraction of it was enough to cause the destruction that followed. This changes the way the event is seen because it shows that what happened was not the full potential of the material. It was only a glimpse of what was possible. Most of the material did not explode, but the tiny part that did was enough to produce an outcome that shocked the entire world. This detail adds another layer of tension because it reveals that the power involved was far greater than what was actually used. When the energy was released, it did not spread slowly. It expanded outward in a fraction of a second, reaching everything around it almost instantly. The first thing that appeared was a blinding flash of light, brighter than anything most people had ever seen. This was followed by extreme heat, so intense that surfaces were scorched and materials reacted instantly. Then came the shock wave, a powerful force moving outward with incredible speed, pushing against buildings and structures with overwhelming pressure. The scale of the impact covered a wide area, affecting not just one point, but an entire city. The effects were not limited to structures alone. People experienced the consequences directly as the physical world around them changed in an instant. This is where the story shifts from science to reality. It is no longer about equations or reactions. It becomes about the human cost of what was released. Physics, which may seem distant and abstract, became something immediate and deeply real. The deeper message begins to take shape when all of this is seen together. The event shows that enormous power is hidden within matter itself, waiting to be unlocked under the right conditions. This power is not visible in everyday life. It does not show itself in ordinary objects or actions, but it exists, quietly stored in the structure of atoms. Science made it possible to understand and access this power, turning knowledge into action. This is where the dual nature of science becomes clear. The same principles that explain the behavior of the universe, the same forces that power stars and create light, can also be used to create destruction. The energy that shines from the sun and supports life on Earth comes from similar processes happening on a much larger scale. This means the line between creation and destruction is not defined by the science itself, but by how it is used. The same equation that explains the universe can also destroy it. This idea stays at the center of the story, connecting every part of it into something larger than a single event. In the end, everything returns to that one simple, almost unbelievable truth. Less than a gram changed history, not a massive force that could be seen coming, not something large enough to fear at first glance, but a tiny fraction of matter quietly holding power beyond imagination. What happened in Hiroshima was not just an event from the past. It was a moment that revealed what reality is truly made of. It showed that the world is not as solid or harmless as it appears, and that inside even the smallest piece of matter, there is energy waiting, silent and invisible, until it is released. And this leads to a question that stays long after the story ends. If such an unimaginable force can come from something so small, then how much power is still hidden around us right now? In the objects we touch, in the air we breathe, in everything that exists? The answer is not simple, and maybe that is what makes it so powerful. Because once this idea is understood, it cannot be ignored. The knowledge remains, shaping the way we see science, technology, and the future itself. Maybe the scariest part is not what has already been done. Maybe it is what is now known to be possible. The same principle described by mass energy equivalence continues to exist everywhere, quietly reminding us that the line between creation and destruction is thinner than it seems. It is a reminder of both human achievement and human responsibility, all connected to a discovery that started with a simple equation and led to a moment that changed the world forever. If this opened your mind and made you see reality in a different way, then stay connected. Subscribe to the channel for more deep and powerful stories that uncover the hidden truths of science and history. Like this video if it made you think, and share it with others who should understand just how much power is hidden in the smallest things, because sometimes the smallest truths are the ones that change everything.